Thank you. Thanks very much for inviting me to this conference. Being here in front of every one of you is a little bit humbling because this is where I get my inspiration from, reading the news and reading about what journalists are doing and pushing the envelope with better reporting to get more information that I then kind of turn into art projects. Mika said that my work is practical, but maybe that was a little bit of a side statement. It kind of straddles the line between what might be practical in a few years as speculative design fiction. What we find happening, though, is that these design fictions are becoming kind of reality. So I've been working on these projects that I'll show you for about 4 years. And I'll start by framing it as these are projects about fashion. And there are actually some interesting parallels between fashion and counter-surveillance. Fashion is about staying one season ahead of the latest trends, and counter-surveillance is about staying one season ahead of the latest algorithms. They both rely on models of deception, and but surveillance, unlike fashion, thrives on conformity, and fashion thrives on being unique, non-conformity, and that can make surveillance difficult. It's this comparison between fashion and counter-surveillance that I'm interested in with my work, and that I'm going to show you some of the work from the past few years that I've developed. Just for context, I'm coming into this work as a photographer and with an additional background in software and hardware development. So I think you'll see that my attitude towards photography has changed a lot over the years. This first series of images is from a project called Stealthware. Stealthware is a project that uses metal-plated fabrics. They flow like silk. They're very drapable fabrics. And it uses these to shield against thermal imaging. Thermal imaging is a fairly new technology, but one that's been in development by the military for at least 20 years. And that's the point at which it can begin to enter the mainstream. This year, thermal imaging will enter the mainstream market as an iPhone attachment for about $350. What you can see in these images is that part of the model is occluded by this kind of thermal cloak. And basically how that works is metal is shielding heat, so you're able to reduce your thermal signature. This is the centerpiece of the collection. It's called the anti-drone burqa. The burqa here is reinterpreted from its original meaning as a separation between man and God. And here, it's reinterpreted as a separation between man and drone, being able to hide yourself from aerial thermal observation. The project was first launched in London last year in January and was published in a few places online and in newspapers. I eventually noticed this tweet from Air Force General Counsel at the Pentagon that they also took note of it. Luckily, that was the last time and only time I heard from them. This is a demo from testing with the anti-drone burqa. This video is shot with a FLIR camera, thermal camera, and it's shot here in New York on 29th Street. I'll give you a few seconds to see if you can find the model wearing the burqa. There are 4 people in this image. 3 of them are very noticeable. Now I've chosen a frame where it works the best here, and the resolution might make it a little bit more difficult. Okay, so when I play it, you'll be able to see her very easily. The legs of the burqa are visible, and I can see her moving out. It's a little bit intentional. It's kind of also a proof of concept, prototype as much as it is an art project. But when you compare the thermal signature of the model wearing the burqa to other people on the street, you get the idea that you could hide. And this is pretty powerful surveillance. It's used by military drones, often to lock on to a target before firing munition. Okay. Now, moving on from this project, I'm going to go back to a project I started here at NYU in 2010. The project is called CV Dazzle, and it explores low-cost solutions to developing disguises against face detection. What you see here is the output of an algorithm that's probing a face detection software to extract the face that it's looking for. It uses a genetic algorithm. Over on the left, you can see these pixelated versions. That's what a computer qualifies as a face, but to a human, it doesn't really look like a face. If you take about 200 of these and you average all the pixels together, the kind of spooky image on the right, that's the face that's hidden inside of an algorithm. It looks a little bit ghoulish, but you can see the basic structure of a face. So this is what a face detection algorithm wants. Now, to continue seeing as a computer, this next visualization shows how a computer is looking for a face. It's a visualization of an algorithm called the Viola-Jones algorithm. It's one of many different face detection algorithms. The way it works is by moving across an image and looking at regions of pixels, and it counts number of pixels above a certain darkness or lightness, and if the difference between that sum matches a certain threshold, it'll mark that as a possible face. After it's done scanning the image, it'll then look at all those possible faces and will qualify that as a face. So that's kind of how a face appears to computer vision. Right, there it is. If you take this profile and kind of explode it into many different pieces, there are thousands of these little rectangles that make up the profile. After a while of staring at these, you can begin to see trends emerge, patterns emerge. And this is how I went about creating looks for the CV Dazzle project by reverse engineering the profiles. The first image I did in 2010 with a professional hairstylist is this, and it worked fairly well. You can see a few things here happening. I think the next slide shows a little better. Okay. A few things in particular are that it's creating asymmetry on the face, and it's blocking the nose bridge area. I have a few tips in the next slide for you to do your own. The name of the project was inspired by this. It's a kind of camouflage that was used and quite popular during World War I called Dazzle. Dazzle is something that confuses human perception, although it's highly visible. It's very clear that there is something there, and that fact really stands out. But the way it works is by confusing the observer if there are maybe two ships and the directionality of each of those ships. So I'm taking that idea and applying it to camouflage from face detection. Basically, to a human observer, it's very obvious that there's a face. It even stands out a lot more. But the way that the makeup and hair is applied makes it confusing to computer vision. Now, here are the tips for you if you'd like to do it. There's the nose bridge area, which is kind of the centroid of a face, and if you occlude that with hair or makeup, that increases the chance of hiding. You need to de-emphasize facial features, meaning typical makeup enhances them, so you have to work around that. Basically, you're inverting areas that are light, making light areas dark and dark areas light. The other things are asymmetry. Faces are supposed to be symmetrical, and you can work against that. And another tip discovered by researchers at the University of Texas is that if you use hair or even an accessory to change the expected elliptical shape of a head, that also reduces the probability of being detected. The key thing to realize with face detection and other biometric algorithms is that these are probabilistic determinations. And if you can figure out a way to exist beneath that threshold, then you can become undetectable. So really the key is finding that threshold, then finding a way to go beneath it. I then collaborated with a fashion magazine in New York, and we created these two looks, a female and a male. And so these were starting to work quite well now, and they garnered some attention online. After about a year, I noticed that they were being cited in research papers for how to make face detection better. Even sometimes specifically citing my project in the references. And then I received this email a request for permission to publish my artwork in a classified intelligence document. Not sure why you have to ask. But I thought, okay, I think I need a new plan. So I met with a curator at the New Museum last year and proposed an idea to do this. It's called the Privacy Gift Shop. It was a pop-up store, and I did the first one last year at the New Museum here in New York. And it went pretty well, and it had a good positive reviews. I introduced the items from Stealthware, as well as a Faraday cage phone case that I've designed. And this is the idea that I'm working on now. I've taken it to Vienna, Tel Aviv. It's now online, where I'll be building up the store and including work from other designers. This is where I think it becomes more interesting. My plan for the store will be, well, first I'm moving the store into this great new space called New Inc., which is part of the New Museum. A lot of new things here. And it will be where I'll operate and meet with people about creating more challenging, critical counter-surveillance artwork. The project that I'm going to first release for this is what's called the Surveillance Trend Report, where I'm going to provide kind of a starter kit of information to help other people work in this way, using information from kind of defense industry trade shows, like the one that was quoting my work. Now I'm using their information to try to get it in the hands of other artists to create more critical work. And that's going to be available here. And that's my last slide, so thank you.